Uptown Radio. It's Thursday, April 17th. I'm your host, Dana Binfet. Today on the show, what can your lipstick tell you about the state of the economy?
For instance, the notion that when, let's say, the economy isn't doing as well, that people buy more lipstick to, let's say, indulge.
And to continue with the theme of buying guilty pleasures, we look at how the tariffs have affected one cigar shop in Manhattan.
If you want to smoke a cigar, you're just going to smoke a cigar. You want a dollar more or the same price or $2, people are going to smoke.
And finally, an exhibition that explores how one New York apartment in the 1960s helped to launch the careers of some of the world's most famous choreographers.
It generated some of the most important artists of the last 50 years in dance.
All this and more coming up.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Law enforcement says a suspect in the shooting today at Florida State University has been, quote, neutralized. At least 6 people were injured. NPR's Greg Allen reports Tallahassee police say the campus has been secured.
The shootings began around noon near the Student Union building in Tallahassee. Police responded quickly and began evacuating students to safety. Several people injured in the shootings were being treated at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, with one listed in critical condition. Although the campus has reopened, students are being told to avoid the Student Union and other buildings that are still considered part of an active crime scene. At the White House, President Trump said he'd been fully briefed on the shootings, calling them horrible. Florida State University says it's canceled all classes and business operations on campus the rest of the week and athletics events through Sunday. Greg Allen, NPR News.
And there's no word yet on a motive. AIDS activists outside the State Department today warned that the Trump administration cuts could lead to a new AIDS crisis around the world. As NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports, millions of people rely on a Bush administration-era program known as PEPFAR for HIV treatment.
Dressed in black and marching along with drums, activists stacked 200 coffins in front of the State Department. They represented the 20 million people around the world who rely on U.S. programs for their AIDS medication. Activist Peter Stanley says President Trump's budget cuts are putting all that at risk.
Is he fully aware what Elon Musk is about to do to his legacy? That he is going to be the president known as relaunching the AIDS crisis around the world.
Stanley says he still hopes that President Trump will ask his Secretary of State to restart PEPFAR, as Marco Rubio has promised to do. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
President Trump is criticizing the chairman of the Federal Reserve for not lowering interest rates. NPR's Scott Horsley reports Trump's own trade war is making that more difficult by putting upward pressure on prices.
Trump accused the Federal Reserve of dragging its feet on interest rates, even as the European Central Bank lowers borrowing costs there. The president says Fed Chairman Jerome Powell will face mounting political pressure for a rate cut, without noting most of that pressure is coming from Trump himself.
I would say the Fed really owes it to the American people to get interest rates down. That's the only thing he's good for.
Powell told the Economic Club of Chicago this week that Trump's tariffs are likely to cause higher inflation, at least temporarily. That's a big reason the Fed is taking its time in cutting rates. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Wall Street mixed at the close. The Dow down 527 points. The Nasdaq down 20 points. The S&P 500 up 7. Wall Street will be closed tomorrow in observance of Good Friday. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
It's been more than 20 years since New York has elected a Republican governor, but GOP Congresswoman Elise Stefanik may be working to change that. According to numerous news outlets, the 6th-term Congresswoman is considering throwing her hat in the ring. I spoke with Laura Tamman, a political science professor at Pace University, to see how New Yorkers may feel about Stefanik's potential run.
Voters have a lot of feelings right now in New York. I think they're nervous about the market turmoil, which disproportionately affects New York because of New York City being the center of the financial markets. So while the last election, 2024, we saw some shifts towards Donald Trump, in parts of New York we're not used to seeing those shifts. What the landscape will look like in 2026 is still pretty unclear.
Stefanik is a known ally of President Trump. He was her pick to be ambassador to the United Nations. How do you think that might influence her potential to appeal to New York voters?
So it's a really interesting scenario, and it's not clear to me if she actually does want to run for governor and is going to jump in, or if she's just sort of putting a toe in to make it clear to her colleagues in the House that she wants to be elevated in the House. And if they don't elevate her, she's going to turn around and run for governor. It's interesting because without her jumping in, the presumed Republican nominee was Congressman Lawler, who I actually think has done a masterful job of appealing to moderate voters that are going to be key in the 2026 election. However, in a Republican primary scenario, if Stefanik jumps in and it's Stefanik v. Lawler, I would expect Stefanik to get the Republican nomination because she's so closely aligned with Trump, and the Republican Party, at least to date, is still so closely aligned with President Trump.
Typically, races tend to favor incumbents, and in this case, we're talking about Kathy Hochul. Who do you think is in the lead right now?
The race is Kathy Hochul's to lose, but she's really been adept at losing. Like New York is not a crazy liberal state. So it is not out of the question that they would elect a Republican, especially given that Kathy Hochul has been had a pretty weak performance as governor. She's kind of tried to be everything to everyone, and nobody's that happy with her. She sort of was a champion of congestion pricing and then wasn't, and she canceled it, and then she wanted it back, and then Trump wants to take it away, and then she stands up for it. But she just seems a little all over the place. So she's definitely weak and vulnerable. Vulnerable to both a Democratic primary challenge, which I have not heard a lot about, but she's also vulnerable to the right Republican coming in.
You talked a little bit about how New York State, traditionally blue, but it's sort of changing. And this potentially Stefanik stepping in as a Republican candidate with a big boost from a Republican president. Does it say anything about the national political climate?
Yeah, I just don't think we know yet what it is saying. So we'll just have to see what happens in the midterm elections and how voters respond to what's happening on the federal level, because the situation is so dynamic that we are all just drinking from a fire hose trying to keep up with events as they happen. It's challenging to predict what's going to happen in a year. Is nearly impossible. But the fact that someone so closely aligned with Donald Trump is being talked about as a credible candidate for governor in New York is very telling.
Pace University professor Laura Taman, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We may be headed towards entering a recession. How to tell? There's the bond market, consumer sentiment, and one little cheeky way. You may have heard of the lipstick index.
It's called the lipstick index, and it's the theory that as the economy goes down, sales of things like lipstick actually go up.
It is called the lipstick indicator, and it's long given investors and consumer companies a pretty good sense of the economy.
Madeline Riley explores some alternative theories for testing the health of the economy.
The lipstick index is supposed to be a way to measure consumer behavior. For example, small purchases can be correlated with an upturn or downturn. Let's say the economy isn't doing so well. People buy more lipstick to indulge in an emotional luxury, like buying yourself a bottle of wine after you've had a hard day. Charles Lindsay is a professor of marketing and consumer behavior at the University at Buffalo. He says the lipstick index can be unreliable.
It's a very imperfect indicator. Lipstick sales did go up after 9/11. At the same time, if you look at the Great Recession and the pandemic, they actually went down.
The lipstick index was created by Leonard Lauder, the son of Estee Lauder, after 9/11, possibly to sell more lipstick in a difficult market. Lindsay says it hasn't held up, but there's another fashion-related way to measure the health of the economy.
On the other hand, or I should say, if we transition to hemlines, a little bit more reliable.
the hemline index.
Traders and designers alike believe when stocks are falling, skirts get longer, and when stocks rally, it's time to bust out the minis.
The higher the stocks rise, the shorter their dresses get.
Hemlines went up during the Roaring '20s, went down during and after the Great Depression, all the way through World War II.
And then through the 60s, lines went up, all the way through to what they called the millionaire 80s, and then went down again in the recession in 87.
So a little bit better correlation there than with lipstick, but again, a very imperfect index.
Dawn Karen agrees. She's known as the dress doctor and says she prefers to measure the country's economic health by looking at fashion. She says she's noticed some changes since the pandemic.
Well, I have been seeing the longer skirts. I have been seeing darker colors.
Karen says fashion choices are one way consumers express themselves during hard economic times, like a trend known as the coastal grandmother. Imagine Diane Keaton in a rom-com, big sun hats, and a blue pinstripe shirt. Or another known as old money, which I'll describe as fake Chanel, meaning fast fashion and plastic pearls, and cheap, cheap, cheap sunglasses. It's a conservative look.
So I feel like when you dress conservative, it's having a bit of control, trying to conceal what you're going through, trying to present this image of I'm put together.
But Professor Lindsay says we can't fully rely on these indicators. Instead, look at how consumers are spending on other luxuries like alcohol, dining out, and if the economy is doing well, they tend to loosen their purse strings. From Columbia Radio News, I'm Madeline Riley.
Good news for New Yorkers who jaywalk. In case you didn't know, it wasn't always legal. As Hannah Weaver reports, the final step to legalize the practice took place this morning.
I'm on the corner of 114th and Broadway. Pedestrians are confidently crossing through 6 lanes of traffic. We got buses, bikes, and taxis. For the next few minutes, jaywalking is still technically illegal. But most of the people who I spoke to here had no idea, like Paul Stetzer. It's about to become officially legal in like 5 minutes. Did you know that?
It hasn't always been legal. It's certainly always been the custom.
While it may be the custom, fines for jaywalking used to run you up to $250, but NYPD rarely gave tickets. Then in October, City Council voted to decriminalize jaywalking. This morning, the Department of Transportation is about to hold a hearing to make their rules match the City Council vote, which gives us just enough time for one final flirt with the law. All right, should we go?
Sure.
Let's go. We're walking across the street. Are you going to change anything about your jaywalking habits now that it's legal? Are you going to take even more advantage of it?
No. I'm not sure I could.
Well, no matter how you're crossing, make sure you look both ways first. Hannah Weaver, Columbia Radio News.
You're listening to Uptown Radio. There's more to come. Stay with us. You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm Dana Binfet. Coming up, we look at a protest for the National Day of Action for Higher Education and the correlation between tariffs and cigars, plus how sustainable businesses are making the best of Earth Day amidst these tariffs. And later on in the show, an exhibition exploring the Dance Theater Workshop. These stories coming up. But first, the news.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Una Milliken. New Jersey is suing messaging server Discord, according to reporting from Wired. The lawsuit filed by the New Jersey Attorney General claims Discord is not doing enough to protect young users. Discord has a 13-year age minimum for users to sign up, but the New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin says it doesn't enforce the rule enough. The lawsuit also points to a mass shooting that was live-streamed on the platform and an alleged pedophile ring as examples of content that is unsafe. Norwegian energy company Equinor announced on Thursday that they would pause construction on one of their renewable wind turbine projects in federal waters off of New York. This comes after the Trump administration put a work stop order on the project the day before. The renewable energy terminal, which started construction last year, was expected to be able to power 500,000 homes a year. It was set to begin operation in 2027 and was approved as a part of President Biden's plan to move towards green energy. Hockey Rangers player Artemi Panarin has been accused of sexual assault by a team employee. The announcement came after Panarin was named MVP of the year on Wednesday. The parent company of the Rangers and Panarin reached a settlement with the women last year after the alleged assault took place in 2023. The Frick Collection reopened today after it was closed for renovation nearly 5 years ago. The $220 million update includes the construction of a new auditorium, new access to the second floor of the building, and updated amenities. The collection includes works of famed artists like Vermeer, Monet, Bellini, and Rembrandt. Visitors can see the new space on Fifth Avenue now. After a cooler morning in the 40s, temperatures are expected to rise to a high of 62 degrees today. You won't need your umbrella as it's supposed to be sunny until tomorrow. Northbound 2 trains are delayed after disruption at Borough Hall, and northbound 4-5 trains are delayed due to track maintenance at 86th Street. 7 trains are delayed in both directions. Una Milliken, Columbia Radio News.
Today at campuses across the country, students, faculty, and community members are staging protests under the name National Day of Action for Higher Education. The protests are in response to policies from the Trump administration surrounding higher education. And here in New York, protesters turned out at Adelphi in the Bronx, SUNY Farmingdale, and SUNY Plattsburgh. Caroline McCarthy reports from the protests this afternoon at New York University and Washington Square Park.
Get out or we fight back!
It's just afternoon here at Greenwich Village, and about 20 NYU Tisch students and faculty are congregating at the east side of the Washington Square Fountain. The Theater Artists Against the Trump Administration, an unofficial NYU group, will protest the best way they know how: dance. A faculty member at NYU Tisch asked to be unnamed. He said the current administration has had a lot to say about how we use our bodies, and this group of performers has something to say back.
I'm here today to stand up with my friends and colleagues around the country who are demanding that the executive branch stop infringing upon our rights to teach, to organize, to encourage students, encourage one another from whatever perspective we have.
I think it's fair to say that a flash mob is a non-traditional form of protest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how you think it would be more effective.
What the administration is doing is ridiculous, and ridiculous actions need to be responded to ridiculously. So often we engage with one another in a very formalized way. Dancing and performing has a way of breaking all that and saying, you know what, if we can express ourselves this joyfully, this playfully, this ridiculously, then maybe we can do other things. We can challenge other norms that exist around us, and therefore, get under the skin of the people in power who might disagree with that.
The group performed a choreographed chant, which they had posted online so others could join in. Gwendolyn Elker is a professor at NYU. She leads the Theater Artists Against the Trump Administration. She also teaches Latinx theater, which inspired today's performance. Can I ask, what was the inspiration for bringing a dance into a rally like this?
So we're theater artists. We like to have fun, and we find sometimes humor is the best way to handle fascism. People who are standing with Trump, they often don't know what to do with people who are creative or take a little bit more of a different perspective on how to protest. And then more politically, we were inspired by a lot of the flash mobs done by Latin American feminists who use this technique to raise awareness and get people involved in a political movement so that it can spread beyond this particular moment in time.
The troupe repeated their dance 4 times during the flash mob, drawing a crowd of between 50 to 100 people who stopped to watch. Some began chanting along, others took photos and videos. The group has a clear message for the Trump administration. Avery is a student at NYU. She participated in the dance and asked not to use her last name.
I think that the current administration's attack on education and educational institutions is something to not be taken lightly. I think it's something that we've seen historically in other totalitarian, authoritarian regimes. And I think it's something we need to continue to fight against. And also just as a citizen of America, to be complacent is to be complicit.
At 3 p.m., the day of protest concluded with a march. The group walked from Washington Square Park to Foley Square in the financial district, where the New York Civil Liberties Union held a rally called the Rally for the Right to Learn. For Columbia Radio News, I'm Caroline McCarthy.
The president's tariff plans have been changing quickly, and it's been hard for many small businesses that depend on imports to keep up. Joy Ama checks in with one Manhattan business owner to see how he's coping.
Jesus Martinez runs the family's business, Martinez Handmade Cigar, just a few blocks south of Madison Square Garden. His father founded a store more than 5 decades ago after coming from the Dominican Republic as a teenager.
And he got the opportunity to come to the United States, and basically this is the only thing he knew how to do, roll cigars, so he decided to open up in New York.
Martinez's store operates as both a factory and a wholesaler. The space is tiny. On the left, 4 employees sit, rolling cigars and smoking them while working. On the right, there's a glass showcase full of their handiwork. Martinez says they use imported tobacco leaves from the Dominican Republic, which now faces a 10% tariff, but he's not that worried.
What's going to happen is, if the importer got to pay the 10%, he's going to pass that 10% to me, and I'm going to have to pass the 10% to the consumer.
To make cigars, Martinez imports raw materials from countries that face different tariffs. Mexico is facing 25%, and Nicaragua was set to face an 18% tariff. But then, 8 days ago, President Trump paused those tariffs for 90 days, reducing the tariffs that Martinez would have had to pay for Nicaragua and tobacco leaves from 18% to 10%. Martinez sells his cigars for about $10 to $15 each, so he doesn't think the extra cost will turn away his customers.
If you want to smoke a cigar, you're just going to smoke a cigar. You want a dollar more or the same price or $2, people are going to smoke.
His last pre-tariff order gives him enough stock to last for a couple of months. Wolf is a regular customer here. He's sitting on an easy chair and puffing on the store's well-known Robusta cigar. We're not using his real name because he works in the import-export business. He's not from the U.S. and doesn't want to anger his customers. He has been smoking cigars for 26 years.
You take a break with a cigar. You stop everything that you are doing. You sit down, you smoke, you and your thoughts and the cigar. You cannot do other things when you're smoking a cigar.
It's not just tariffs on tobacco leaves. Cigars made in other countries and imported may also face additional taxes. But Wolf is very chill about the idea. He makes high-end loudspeakers and moves components from country to country. For him, paying an extra $1 or $2 is not a big deal. But he realized that it may be for other customers and big picture. He's not happy about Trump's consistent shifting plans.
I think any business decision, whether it's tariff or other regulation that is made based on mutual understanding, fair negotiation in good faith, should be accepted by us as business people, as consumers. But again, this era, these times, don't look to me very rational.
For the store owner, Jesus Martinez, it's business as usual. He says that includes tariffs and taxes.
So, every time the taxes go up, unfortunately, you got to pass it down to the consumer.
He's open for smokers 7 days a week as long as his customers don't mind paying an extra $1 or $2. Drama, Columbia Radio News.
Earth Earth Day is less than a week away, but New York City businesses that focus on sustainability efforts are celebrating early. Hannah Lorenzo was at the Earth Day Festival at Union Square Park earlier. Many of these businesses are concerned with their prices rising from President Donald Trump's tariffs, but others don't see much of an impact yet.
It's a sunny spring day at Union Square Park. In the middle of the square, there's a stage set up with pops of purple, pink, and blue banners promoting the Earth Day Festival. The pop music is already blaring, but only a few businesses have shown up to their booths, including jewelry company Article 22. General Manager Kendall Solwanek is still setting up her booth that's draped in pink and green tablecloth. The jewelry's not out on display yet, but she's wearing some of the pieces, including a silver bangle made out of upcycled aluminum.
So it's part shrapnel, part recycled aluminum that our artisans melt down into a mold. They make it with wood and ash. They carve the shape into it, and they pour the aluminum into the top, and it cools in the mold to form these shapes.
The company's jewelry pieces are made by artisans in Laos, which is one of the countries in Southeast Asia that President Trump is placing higher tariffs on.
With, of course, the tariffs and this impact on small business especially, it is going to become very unsustainable for small businesses with those tariffs. So, of course, they've been frozen for a couple days, and we're hoping to continue to advocate for that freeze. I believe the Lao tariff was 48% when it was announced. So.
A 48% tariff on imports from Laos is in addition to President Trump's 10% baseline for virtually all countries. But Article 22's jewelry pieces haven't had to change because of the temporary freeze on the increase of tariffs.
So bangles range between $40 and $80 engraved. Earrings start closer to $130. Our necklaces start at $85, and rings start around $110. However, our prices have not increased with the tariffs yet, so we're hoping to maintain, keep this a very attainable jewelry for everybody at every price point.
What about the bags that we take to the store? Mark Nathan is the CEO of Plastech. He sells reusable bags that he says are made out of a patent-pending antimicrobial agent.
Feels like plastic, looks like plastic, acts like plastic, but it's all made of corn. These bags literally cost 30 cents, and they're stronger than those reusable bags, those polypropylene bags that you buy at the store for $1 or $2.
His bags are made in China, but he plans to move the company's production to the U.S. Nathan says that even with tariffs, which Trump raised to 145% on Chinese imports, the cost of his products are still affordable.
The pricing I was giving you is what is currently with the tariffs. So when the tariffs come back down, which they will eventually, they'll be even go down. But we're really the same price as plastic, which is great, and there's zero plastic in it and higher quality product.
A few booths away, Nikki Lee is standing behind different colored pots and plates. Lee is the catering manager of Le Botaniste, a plant-based restaurant. Lee previews a few of the dishes and treats that they're selling to customers today.
And then also our plant-based chili, and then it's topped with turmeric onions and sour cream. That's made out of coconut, and also fresh herbs. And we also have our delicious desserts, chocolate pecan cookie, quinoa peanut butter cookie, and our omega-3 brownie.
Lee says the U.S. government hasn't been doing enough to ease the impact of climate change, especially after President Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement, an international treaty on climate change, earlier in January. But Lee says people can still make a difference, even through food.
I think it's on everybody else's part to do our best to minimize wherever we can. Even just eating one plant-based meal can really help, just in your own life. It doesn't take more than small efforts, basically, to kind of take part in reducing your carbon footprint.
The Earth Day Festival is hosted annually in New York City and also includes exhibits by environmental nonprofits, green living experts, sustainable businesses, and even an improv team performance. The booths are at Union Square for the festival until 6 p.m. today. Hannah Lorenzo, Columbia Radio News.
Modern dancers always need at least one thing to practice their art: space. But in 1960s New York, rehearsal space was hard to come by. So along came Dance Theater Workshop, an artist-led space and programming organization that launched the careers of some of today's most celebrated choreographers. Yesterday, an exhibition exploring Dance Theater Workshop opened at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts at the Lincoln Center. Reporter Maud Yaish visited the exhibition.
The Dance Theater Workshop exhibition was built, appropriately enough, in a dance studio. On display are notes on choreography, videos of performances, and interviews, like this one from Whoopi Goldberg, one of many performers who started at the workshop, also known as DTW.
Well, I don't think that the career I've had and am having would have happened without being exposed here at DTW.
It generated some of the most important artists of the last 50 years in dance.
Linda Murray is the curator of the DTW exhibition. She says the collective launched so many important careers, in part because it was a safe space, a place where it was okay to fail.
Experimentation was encouraged, and failure because of experimentation was not seen as a bad thing because they weren't commercially driven. And so they didn't really have to answer to anybody. So if the critics didn't like it or the audience didn't like it, they would just say, well, try again.
This free spirit is explained in a video interview in the exhibition with Deborah Levitt, a dance critic and choreographer.
We thought of ourselves as kind of not exactly a cooperative, but it was a very sort of 60s organization, and the people that were part of it were a tight little nucleus with strays that came in and went.
That sense of freedom led to innovative performances, like Blondell Cummings' piece entitled Chicken Soup. Cummings, a major figure in postmodern dance and a black woman in the field, performed this piece at the Dance Theater Workshop, and it's featured in the exhibition.
1, 2, 3.
And so it's a work that takes domestic tasks like scrubbing the floor and turns it into a performative, repetitive act and does make a statement about domesticity.
Although it started in a very humble space, almost right from the beginning until it closed in 2011, DTW was a key part of the dance scene, a place where critics went to see what was coming next in the art form. Linda Murray recalls Donald Byrd and Bill T. Jones both performed there on the same program.
Two of the most important black choreographers of the last 50 years showed up on the same day and both made it into the choreographer showcase.
In the video at the exhibition, Whoopi Goldberg remarks that DTW and other spaces that encourage experimentation are vital for the creative life of the city.
The importance of supporting people with vision and places with vision is that if they all disappear, what are we left with?
DTW still continues today as New York Live Arts, which programs a variety of dance performances in their space on 19th Street in Manhattan. The Dance Theater Workshop exhibition runs through September 13 at the Library for Performing Arts at Lincoln Center. Modiaish, Columbia Radio News.
Well, that's all for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show. This week's production is dedicated to David Shapiro. Our leader today was executive producer ZJ Young. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Maud Yaish. Special thanks to our senior editor Flora Warshaw and assistant editor Madeline Riley. Director Hannah Weaver coordinated our studio production with Joya Ma. Thanks to our newscaster Una Milliken and our day reporters Hannah Lorenzo and Caroline McCarthy. Our instructors Sally Herships, Ben Shapiro, and Priscilla Alabi advised our staff. I'm your host, Dana Binfed. Uptown Radio is live on Thursdays at 4 and anytime at uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.